Hello, and welcome to the Bot Nirvana podcast, where we dive into all things software automation. I'm your host, Nandan Mullakra. While I'm not podcasting, I write articles on nandan.info. I hope you enjoy the show. Let's get right into it. Today we have Allan Zimmerman. He's the founder of Open RPA. Open RPA, along with OpenFlow, is a powerful open source RPA platform for your automation needs. This is a Q&A session we recorded as part of a demo. The link to the complete video is in the show notes if you'd like to see that. Let's start with the show. Allan, so the first question is about, is it a new tool? I think people just discovering it. So I thought maybe you can talk about your tool history. There's a question from Roshan Revankar.
Is it a new tool? Yes and no. So the core code inside the robot and inside OpenFlow comes from another platform that I created in another company. And I own the rights to that, and I decided to take that and create an open source version of that and continue to build on that. So to be fair, there's 2.5 years development behind this platform. But making the open source version, I started writing everything from scratch, top down, and that has been in the works since April last year. So I guess you can say the platform has almost 1.5 years on its back.
Oh, okay, great. So why did you create that earlier project?
It was part of a company that I had with a couple of other guys that ended up not being what we expected. But generally speaking, we by accident came across RPA and started creating our own RPA. I started creating my own RPA tool. But the vision from the different founders was not the same, and we had to split up. And I still believe there's a market for the way that I wanted to use RPA, or rather, I wanted to create a platform that could automate things across things, IT systems, and people. And RPA just was a good fit for that as well. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And so, did you come across UiPath or any other tool, and then you started building something similar?
It's actually a funny story. My inspiration for creating a robot came from Cryon. Back then, you couldn't just go and download the latest community version of all the RPA vendors' tools. You had to fill out a form and get a phone call, and then you would get a demo from a sales representative, right? You couldn't really test the tools back then. And the only one that allowed me to test the tool was Cryon. Okay. And after trying Cryon's tool, I had this feeling, I can do this better. And I've been using Microsoft Workflow Foundation, a lot of other projects for many, many years. I'm a huge fan of Microsoft Workflow Foundation. So I thought, why not use that instead? Why create my own workflow engine when I can use Microsoft Workflow Foundation? So that's where the idea came up. I had no idea that UiPath had done the same thing at that point. But I found out quickly because everyone that I showed the tool to was like, oh, you stole UiPath's UI. So I quickly learned about UiPath. Yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting. That's a good story. And so I've not seen Cryon. So Cryon work is similar to UiPath then?
I would not say it works the same way, but they have a workflow engine, and they have this idea of building blocks and properties and all of that. So it is a visual work tool, and it has
okay,
but has a very advanced recorder. Let's say it that way. Yeah.
But they are not using Workflow Foundation.
No, they have their own framework, just like Blue Prism and others. Yeah.
So you independently came up with Windows Workflow Foundation, and UiPath also happened to use Workflow Foundation. That's interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, there's not a lot of different workflow engines out there that you can use that is freely available. I mean, if you do a Google search on workflow engine with a UI, you will find maybe free tools out there. So there's not a lot of different things you can choose from anyway,
Okay.
unless you want to create your own. So I don't think it's that interesting. Yeah.
Okay. But the interesting part is that all this is built on free open stuff available on from Windows. And then that part is commercialized. But the good thing is you are open sourcing everything. So that's great. Um, so the next question from Murali is any plans to make OpenFlow features available as part of OpenRPA itself? Maybe you can talk about what OpenFlow is and you're making it, and if you're making it part of OpenRPA.
But it already is a part of OpenRPA.
Yeah, that's what
Or
I
maybe
thought.
I'm not sure I understand the question. But you said what is OpenFlow? So OpenFlow is kind of the thing in the middle that ties everything together. OpenFlow is meant to be my contribution of creating something that makes it easy to save data in a secure way using access control list and encryption and version control, together with something that makes it easy to orchestrate many robots and many Node-RED instances. Node-RED is a web-based workflow engine based on Node-RED that integrates to at least 2,000 different IT systems. So that's a very powerful engine to create integration and automation across both IoT systems, traditional production environments, and a lot of IT systems as well. And then when you combine that with the power of RPA, that makes it easy to integrate to systems that don't have an API or an API that is not easily accessible, you instantly have something that makes it easy to automate a lot of things, both in a stable way using APIs and a semi-stable way using RPA. And that was the goal. That was the main plan from the beginning. That was making something that makes the transition from pure RPA to a mix of RPA and APIs, or completely automated using APIs seamlessly. And that is what Microsoft decided to do as well a couple of, 6 months ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think what he means is that he sees this as two separate tools, but
Yes.
it's very integrated, right? Okay, so the next question is from go ahead, Allan.
No, but it's just, I mean, everything that you can do inside Node-RED and OpenFlow, you can do inside the robot. If you connect the robot to OpenFlow, you can initiate and control everything from the robot. But you can also do it the other way around. So you can, from OpenFlow, control everything inside a Node-RED instance, and you can control everything inside a robot. And from Node-RED, you have the option to control everything inside the web, and you have the option to control everything inside the robot. So you can decide what is the best platform for you to initiate something or integrate with the other parts of the platform. So I personally think it is already built in the sense that all 2 or 3 parts can communicate with each other seamlessly. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and I think that makes sense. So we have 3 questions, similar questions. In fact, 4. But let's combine the first 2. So Varun is asking, is open source RPA platform, open source RPA big enough or enough to take on the big 3 vendors? And Nagaraj is asking, how are you trying to compete with the market leaders? Maybe you can combine both and tell us about how how you see open source RPA is better, and how open source RPA can take on the market leaders.
I mean, if you look at the amount of capital that some of the big vendors are raising from venture capitalists, that's kind of hard to compete with. I mean, the amount of developers and marketing and awesome documentation and training they can create is almost impossible to compete with unless you're Robocop. So I would never claim that this can be as good or better than the big three right now. But maybe over time, if enough people wants to contribute and be part of the community, we can beat them and create something that can compete or even beat the commercial platforms out there. But right now, that's not a goal in itself. Right now, the goal in itself is to have an alternative to the commercial products that allows you to own your own bots and own your own data and own your own workflows. There's a tendency right now in the market to try to consolidate everything in cloud platforms and have access to data so you can mine it or monetize on the data or the workflows. And this is a way to give you an option to own it yourself and run it wherever you want.
Yeah, that's very important. So for people who want to own it, who want to combine with other open source in the market, like what Allan is doing with OpenFlow, and also the very option of a $0 bot, I think is very powerful, because that opens up many use cases where you can't implement a use case unless you got to remove people, right? And that becomes a scary situation when implementing in companies. I know that. Because it's all ROI driven and taking off people rather than looking at the benefits. So yeah, there are various options, and Allan has chosen this option, which I think is a great option. I mean, this is not proprietary, and so if you build your bots using Open RPA, you know what you're doing, and you know that you are in control.
Yeah. I mean, if you saw the session with RoboCop a couple of weeks ago, I really liked what he said. Sorry, I can't remember his name.
Anti.
That yeah, exactly. The idea of looking at this as automation more than RPA is important, and that is my primary driver here as well. I mean, Open RPA is just a small part of a big platform that is built for automating across different verticals and different technologies. RPA is just one of many. And I really like that idea, and I totally agree with him. I think where we disagree is where are the citizen developers and what can they do and not, and how do they approach things. That's where we may be a little bit different. Also, I mean, here you have the option to develop in many different languages, not just Python. I also think that is important because not everybody wants to code in Python or a proprietary language like Giant or Robin, but maybe they feel more comfortable in C# or Go or Perl or whatever. So here you have the option to code in whatever you want. But you also have the low code solution using workflows. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So next question is similar. Dave Hurst is asking, what is the key differentiator between OpenRPA and the other RPA platforms? And Sushant is also asking what the similarities and dissimilarities with UiPath. I know this is not your favorite question, but yeah, can you just give a brief about what could be the different differentiators?
Yeah. So OpenRPA is a very basic robot compared to other RPA tools out there that wants to brag about how many activities they have for integration to different systems. My approach is a little bit different. I wanted a robot that could do basic RPA, meaning automating the UI. And then when you want to integrate using APIs, if I had to sit down and write a lot of activity to integrate to all kinds of systems, I would be a bottleneck. I would become a one-man army. But by making it easy to integrate to Node-RED, instantly there's an army of thousands of developers out there developing integration to thousands of systems. And suddenly I'm no longer a one-man army. And that's why I don't want to create tons of different activities in my robot that integrate to Salesforce and ServiceNow and SAP and SAP maybe, but other systems, because you can do that using Node-RED. But I get that sometimes the use case forces you to do API integration from the robot and not Node-RED. For instance, if you're hosting Node-RED in the cloud, maybe you don't have easy access to the internal systems, and in that case, you might need something. So there is a need to add more activities, but it's not my primary driver. And that's a lot different from UiPath, where everything is happening on the client. The orchestra is basically just a shuttling engine that allows you to run bots at intervals, and it offers an easy asset store and a queue system. And that's pretty much it. Where with OpenFlow, you have a complete workflow engine in the cloud that you can use to orchestrate a lot of other things. I think that covers most of the differences and in UiPath and OpenRPA.
Oh, okay, yeah. And I think that's an important point that you're talking about, that you are not a one-man army. With Node-RED, you have many developers developing the integrations. So you are providing the UI integration, and then you can consume the best of breed integration from other developers with OpenFlow or Node-RED.
Yes.
That's nice. Next question, Simhachalam asks, I would like to know the trend of AI with UiPath. I think what he also means is AI with OpenFlow. So, how to integrate those.
So a lot of RPA vendors want to put AI or machine learning in every sentence to make it hotter and better. Or call it hyper automation or whatever. And I really don't want to start competing in that race. It makes no sense.
Right.
I mean, all RPA products right now is using machine learning in some way or the other already. For instance, for doing OCR or image recognition or stuff like that. So if the question is related to will we or will OpenRPA or OpenFlow start embedding their own different solutions built on something that uses neural networks or machine learning? No, I don't think so, because, for instance, some RPA vendors have their own document scanning solutions for detecting text and invoices and stuff like that. And I don't think that I would ever be able to compete with the professional vendors out there already. So it would make more sense to integrate to Apple and Google and AWS and use that instead of trying to create my own. Stick to what you do best, and that is not what I do best. But when that is said, a lot of RPA vendors will integrate to custom machine learning or neural networks using Python. And that's cool. But with Node-RED, we have a lot of other options as well. Because if we run Node-RED in a Kubernetes cluster that has access to GPUs or Google's special processors for TensorFlow, we can actually facilitate that directly from Node-RED. So we can run Node-RED flows that can use the GPUs or special CPUs for TensorFlow training or learning. And we can run OpenAI or Neo.js and other heavy duty work directly from Node-RED and then use that from the robot very, very easily. So if you want to do custom machine learning or AI, you have a very powerful platform here, because you can both do it on the client using Python or C# or whatever you want, but you can also do it inside Node-RED. So you can pick the best place to run your workloads. But you can also call all the AutoML flows out there or integrate to Google ML or Azure ML or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if that answered this question, but it's a broad area, right?
Yeah, that question is a bit vague, but yeah, I like what you said in terms of not chasing hyper automation like the other people who got the money are trying to do, and use the best of breed AI with either using Open RPA or using OpenFlow. So that's some good options there. And just like Sibi did today, even you can use the OCR, which is there. There is a basic OCR, but if you want to use AI, you need to call one of those cloud providers, or any of the options out there. All
I
right.
mean, you brought up an interesting case yourself on LinkedIn a couple of days ago with Ito. Am I saying that correctly? Ito. The guys that make this easy database for doing predictor technologies in unstructured data directly from the cloud. And I mean, they have this awesome API that is very, very, super easy to use, and it would not take many hours to create custom activities for the robot or a node for Node-RED to integrate seamlessly to their platform. And instantly you get access to do easy prediction in data sets from a robot or from OpenFlow. And I would much rather do that than try to build my own.
Yeah. And the name of the tool is aito.ai. And so the next question comes from Movar Technologies. So he asks, how can low-tech small business who operate with a Microsoft technology stack integrate with OpenRPA?
As a developer?
So he's a small provider out there, and he, I think, provides services on Microsoft technology stack. So is there any way to integrate OpenRPA? I've heard from him that he uses Tag UI and he likes it, and he likes to explore OpenRPA for his needs. So how, I think he's asking how like a small business can use OpenRPA.
But I mean, you can use it just like you can download Office or TextPal or something else. I mean, I'm not sure what he means by specifically mentioning the Microsoft stack. So if you mean, how can you extend the robot to other things in the Microsoft stack? So from a developer perspective, Microsoft platform generally has always had very, very good software development kits for different products, both Microsoft's own, but also different ISVs would normally create good software development kits on the Microsoft platform. So developing in Visual Studio and integrating to systems is often very, very easy and nice and pleasant. And since you can extend the robot with activities from Visual Studio very, very easy, it's a nice platform to integrate different Microsoft technologies into the robot. If you mean that, how can you use it with the rest of the ecosystem that Microsoft had? So I'm thinking Asia and Office 365 here. So there is nodes inside Node-RED for talking with most things inside Asia, but they're not the most reliable I've seen. Some of them could really need some work, and I will definitely also be creating my own wrappers for the graph APIs and stuff like that. I mean, if you really want good integration, one obvious thing would be to create a connector from Microsoft Asia Flow, Power Automate into Node-RED. That would be a killer combination, right? But I haven't looked into that yet, but I know it would probably be doable quite easy. So that would definitely be on my to-do plan at some point. But right now, the main integration would be through activities inside the robot or whatever nodes is public available inside the Node-RED community right now. But there are for most things like Microsoft CRM, Microsoft SharePoint, most Asia offerings are already embedded inside Node-RED already.
And how about Dynamics 365 or Great Plains? That's something small business use. Microsoft Dynamics. Do you know if Node-RED has gotten?
Well, if it's the one based on Navision, then you can very, very easily expose OData feeds from Great Plains and the other one. And you can easily work with those from Node-RED or from the robot. But direct integration per se, I don't know of anyone right now.
Okay.
Someone mentioned for me that Dynamics AX has some issues with my robot, but I don't have access to an AX installation, so I can't test it and maybe find a fix. So I don't know if there's an issue there, but I've been told there is.
Okay, you can test with Dynamics 365, I think so, because that's freely available. All right, let's move on to the next question. Next four questions are about document processing. Naveen asks if document processing can be trained on the fly. And Sean Thomas asks, what features does OpenRPA have for document processing?
We touched a little bit on this already, but let's do it again. So OpenRPA or OpenFlow does not have a specific document processing feature. So I guess what they mean is some kind of machine learning algorithm that can easily find out where different things is on a document, for instance, an invoice, and then you can get structured data out of that and use it for something. So if you want to do that, you will need to integrate to API or ROSM or AWS Tesseract or something like that to get that feature out of it. So can we train it from the robot? That becomes a hard question, right? Take ROSM, for instance. The integration I did with ROSM, you can easily create a queue and say, well, if you're pretty certain that you understand everything inside this invoice, just accept it and continue moving on. But if it gets an invoice where it's in doubt, or if it just really can't find anything inside it, you can get that notification from inside the robot or inside OpenFlow. And you can then react on that. For instance, send a link to a user or show a web page on the robot or something like that and say, please fix this. Tell me where the different fields are. And then you can continue on. And then instantly, this becomes, training as part of the robot flow or the Node-RED flow.
Rajesh asks, does OpenRPA support Windows 7?
Yes, okay. It does.
All right. And Sibi is asking, go ahead.
Yeah. So the next question might become, does it support 32-bit? All the modules inside OpenRPA except one compiles perfectly in 32-bit, but I have not created an installer for it because the user base is so small. Right. So if you really want to run OpenRPA on a 32-bit system, you can do it. But the installer only comes with 64-bit binaries right now. And if you want to run it on Windows 7, you need to install one version of the C++ runtime libraries. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's the 2005 version. But then it works perfectly fine on Windows 7. Yeah.
All right. The next one is about security. Sibi is asking about how does OpenRPA fit into the enterprise application security landscape?
So when you specifically mention security, so I mean, if you look at OpenFlow as the primary driver for the platform, then all the data gets saved inside the database, and we want to secure that in some way. So what I did is I add access control lists on all objects inside the database, and the API then enforces that permission set on all the data. And it also exposes that as easy queryable functions, so you can use pure MongoDB queries directly against the database, but it will enforce the security on them. So even if you have hundreds of terabytes of data, you can do ad hoc reporting directly against the data set, and it will respect the permission. So whoever's doing the query will only get results corresponding to whatever they're querying on. This works with MapReduce, aggregation framework, and simple queries. On top of that, there's a rather simple implementation. It can be more advanced, and it will probably become that soon. But there is a simple implementation of doing ad hoc encryption on data inside the database. So if you have, for instance, if you want to comply with GDPR or HIPAA or Canada Privacy Act, you should encrypt the data that is personal. And you can do that ad hoc by adding attributes to the documents and saying, I want all these attributes encrypted, and it will encrypt them with EAS 256-bit encryption on the fly. You don't have to do anything, it just does it for you. So if someone compromises the API or get a hold of a backup, the data will be unreadable. The next step is that everything inside the platform is built on least privileges. So whoever is calling something somewhere else in the system will always use their own token. So at no point are you escalating permissions. So a robot calling something inside Node-RED will still run in context of the user that ran on the robot inside Node-RED. So even if Node-RED is running as an admin or a different user, you can get access to that data. So when you're acquiring the database, calling other robots or calling other flows, it will still respect the permissions. And it does that all around. So everything done from the web page, everything done from inside Node-RED, and everything done inside the robot will be done in context of the user that did the request. And I think that's kind of important when you're talking security and large-scale installations. And lastly, talking security, if you really want to, you can actually encrypt all data between all the different instances running in the setup. Per default, if you follow my installations guide, it will only encrypt data between Node-RED and the API, and the robot and the API and the database. But you can also get everything encrypted to the MQTT queues and to the RabbitMQ queues if you want that as well.
All right, that's perfect.
Did I forget anything?
Yeah, so probably just to put it in simple terms, for everybody out there, it's basically, when you create a workflow, you have very specific access permissions for that workflow. You can go to that level and then add accesses. So whatever you see on the major tools, or probably even more, security aspects is there in this tool. And then probably, since we are there, Allan, so probably on the scalability aspect also, if you could just touch upon those, that would be great. How you're distributing, the load and etc. So that also would be useful information for guys out there, because that is also going to be a major criteria.
I think we covered that in the last session, but just to brief it up real quickly. So
no, if nobody needs it, it's fine.
So OpenFlow as a platform can run as a pure Node.js installation. So I actually have installation, a full-blown version of OpenFlow running on Raspberry Pis. But generally speaking, I prefer that it runs inside Docker. And if it runs inside Docker, it can run on pretty much any hardware that you have that can run Windows, Linux, or Mac, and you can run a single non-redundant, non-resilient installation there. But if you start moving into the distributed systems like Docker Swarm, OpenShift, or Kubernetes, the whole platform is built I won't call it a microservice architecture, because that may be taking it too far, but it is built as something that is very, very scalable, and all parts of the platform can be load balanced, and it also supports traffic shaping. So you can, within a couple of hours, create a setup that runs across several thousand servers across 6 data centers really, really easy. And that's not something you see a lot out there. So you have a very hyper scalable solution that can run on low consumer hardware and still do pretty well. And it can run on very, very big distributed systems across multiple data centers and take enormous amounts of load. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's great vision. That's good to know. It's so much scalable. So I think the last question here is on what are the future plans, and Biju asks how you will keep up with the surging demands. I think on demand are probably the features coming up, features requests, and Padraig, I hope I'm saying that right. Murphy, I think he's on the call. He wants to know about your future plans and features.
Yeah, so I get that question a lot, and I don't have a roadmap per se, but I will try and get one up and on GitHub or something in the near future, so people can pitch in on ideas and comment on the things that I'm planning that I might want to implement. But just right here, right now, what am I working on? So I'm using a lot of time right now on finishing up my SAP integration. So you can now use SAP GUI scripting to automate things inside SAP from the robot. And from what I hear, it should actually be quite good. I hope so. And the other thing that I'm starting to use a lot of time on is, so when OpenFlow is running in the cloud, then sometimes you want to offload a workflow to somewhere else, but you don't want to run a complete OpenFlow installation there. You can easily do that. You can have multiple OpenFlow installations talking to each other in a chain or in a mesh topology. But sometimes you want just a Node-RED running, on the specific case that I'm looking at is someone that wants to run Node-RED on PLCs, right? So we want something that can make Node-RED run externally, but get its flow from OpenFlow and still work if it loses the internet connection. But if it is connected, it can easily communicate with the central platform. That works right now. I have 2 customers using it, but it's not super user-friendly. So that needs some more work. That is what in the pipeline right now.
How about your process discovery, Allan? You're working on process discovery?
Yeah, I gave up on that.
Okay.
Actually, the funny thing is, 3 different vendors have contacted me within the last couple of months to ask if we could create some kind of collaboration where they use Open RPA as the one collecting all the data that they then use on their machine learning algorithms to do process discovery. Mm-hmm. And another guy contacted me a couple of weeks ago about offering that when he does process discovery with his gathering robots and inside his platform, he can generate files that can easily integrate it into OpenRPA. So once you have the processes and you want to automate them, you can just export a sample file directly from his system. So it's not that it's not coming. It's just I would probably not be the one creating it right now. Okay. Maybe in the future I'll do it. I'll have a look again and do it on my own. But right now, there's others out there that has more time and focus and can do better than I can do on my own.
I agree. Yeah. Don't pursue hyper automation. one person pursuing hyper automation will be too much. All right. Thank you for joining the Bot Nirvana podcast. Appreciate if you can leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Catch the show notes on botnirvana.org. While you're there, feel free to explore more automation ideas, tutorials, tools, and more. See you next time.